Suspect is wearing a leather jacket. He's holding a man hostage. He's screaming that the chess club just works. Protect the IP at all costs. Take the shot. Take the shot! There's 3 guarantees in life. Death, taxes, and the Elder Scrolls 6 being a letdown. But one of those doesn't have to be. Ever since I moved to Angola, I haven't paid a dime in tax. It is not looking good for Elder Scrolls 6. I already know some of you guys are going to go to the comments and start defending Bethesda because they used their common sense for once and made an Oblivion Remaster, which they didn't even make to be precise, they just allowed for it to happen. And that's not even mentioning the fact that you need a freaking NASA supercomputer to play the damn game. But let's not forget that before that, their track record was awful. Fallout 76 at launch was an absolute joke. Starfield copied No Man's Sky's homework, but then somehow made it worse. If 76 was the first plane, then Starfield was the second, if you're whiffing what I'm farting. They reskinned Fallout Shelter with Elder Scrolls, became pioneers in paid mods, the writing in all of their games has been on a steady decline since Oblivion, and they consider Radiant quests content. Bethesda has deteriorated, not just financially, but also morally.
I have sinned against you, my lord.
I couldn't figure out how to deepfake, so I had to scar your eyes with whatever that was. Throughout the years, they have committed major wrongs, specifically the 7 deadly sins: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, envy, wrath, pride. This is the typical order of the deadly sins in terms of least heinous to most heinous, and this is the order that we will be following in this video. Without any further ado, let's discuss how Bethesda has committed each sin and how they can be redeemed, so that Elder Scrolls 6 can be spiritually saved.
It's a fine day with you around.
Hey, baby. Come to Butthead.
When you think of lust and Bethesda, the first thing that probably comes to your mind is the lusty Argonian maid. This Bard's Tale has been a recurring trope in Bethesda games, and the attention to detail is surprisingly well done for literature that's meant as just an aside in these games. And they're sexualizing animals to the point where even I have a problem with it. What a disgusting company this is. They're sexualizing the lizards, they're sexualizing the cats. Frankly, the Argonians are taking the Khajiit jobs. Khajiit maids, I've had many of them, they're amazing people, excellent people, maybe the best maids in all Tamriel. I walked in here and said, wow, what a nasty company this is. But in all seriousness, does someone mind telling me, why does the lusty Argonian maid have better writing than the main story of Skyrim? I'm not even joking. There is more continuity, character depth, and natural writing in this fanfiction than the actual story of a game with a budget of $85 million. Like, is that what the writing team spends their time on? Okay, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh, but the writing in Skyrim is stiff in a lot of areas. Like me when I'm reading The Lusty Argonian Maid. And the world feels unresponsive to many of the things you do. I've brought this example up in like 3 different videos, but the point still stands. You kill the Emperor in the Dark Brotherhood storyline, and nobody talks about it. And there's so many other areas like this in Skyrim and other BGS games. And before we go any further, I don't want you guys thinking that I hate Skyrim. I love Skyrim, it was my first Elder Scrolls game, and it's a great game overall. But it's not perfect, and we need to address these faults to make Elder Scrolls 6 the best that it can be. But anyways, let's get back to lust. You can see in Skyrim that less time is spent on the writing and world building, and it seems like Bethesda RPGs in general try to distract you with other things so that you pay less attention to the writing and depth of the world in general. Todd, you ain't gonna distract me with the Vuz and Hot Springs. The Chuz at Honor Hall Orphanage will not distract me. Speaking of distractions, it seems like some of the Bethesda employees were a bit distracted while making Skyrim. And they were allegedly engaging in soulless behavior, if you get what I mean.
Somebody's doing the raping, Don. I mean, you know, somebody's doing the, you're saying it's women being raped. Well, who's doing the raping? Who's doing the raping? I mean, how can you say such a thing?
If Bethesda wants to redeem itself from this sin, then they need to spend more time on the quests and writing in Elder Scrolls 6, and less time on the fanfiction. Moving on to some more serious matters, Bethesda has become a glutton. They overindulge. Across their recent games is the crime of excess. This really became a problem from Fallout 4 and onward, although you could make a case that it started even before that. So what are they overindulging in? Radiant quests and settlements. Now a Radiant quest here and there isn't that big of a crime, but solely relying off of these quests as the primary content outside of the main story is where it becomes a serious issue. The same can be said for settlements, which are a cool idea and a nice novelty, but they get old and boring too. In Fallout 4, if you're just playing the vanilla game, there is nothing to do outside of the main story other than Radiant quests and building settlements. This issue comes back in full swing in Starfield, and it's arguably even worse, because Bethesda then becomes an offender in having too much space without enough detail. Literally, this entire game is basically empty space. They basically become space fat asses. And look, I understand space is kinda empty, and that's a theme of the game, but at the end of the day, I'm playing a fucking video game. I want interesting content that doesn't feel extremely repetitive. My worries for the Elder Scrolls 6 is that this trend of over-reliance on building and Radiant quests is going to continue. We'll definitely have some of the OG factions like the Dark Brotherhood, Thieves Guild, and a main quest line, but they have to give us more unique quests outside of that. Skyrim did a great job in this department by giving us a whole slew of factions and different types of quests. One of these side quest lines that I absolutely love are the Daedric artifacts. Looking at the Elder Scrolls games, they all diversify when it comes to their factions. Each of them give you a unique faction in their province. Morrowind had the Great Houses, Oblivion had the Arena, Skyrim had the Companions, and I believe Elder Scrolls 6 will be no exception to this rule. It's basically confirmed that the game is in Hammerfell because of all the Easter eggs and because there's a employee.
I got this rat, this gnawing, key-eating fucking rat.
To come and shut this man up, a little rat, a little weasel, a little hard man in groups. I've met many of them through my...
Rat is this. The rats are all like this. The rat goes like this. So the rat's like this. The normal rat is like this. That's the normal rat. Like this, like this. It sniffs. It's like this for quite a while. He's like this. And then maybe he sniffs. You are now a normal rat.
Whose Pinterest board shows posts related to a desert setting, i.e. Hammerfell. Given this, we'll probably see the Ashaba be a faction you can join, and they are just a group of Redguards who fight the undead, and if you don't know, striking the undead is extremely scandalous in Redguard culture, so this makes the province particularly susceptible to necromancers. And this is where the Ashaba come in. We will probably also have wars between the Crowns and Forebears, so I'm hoping we get multiple factions, and it's crucial that if Bethesda wants to reach that next level, then your decisions need to matter and have ripple effects. If I join the Ashaba, I should not be able to do conjuration in front of them because they hate that stuff. If I join the Crowns, then the world should change in a way that is completely different from if I join the Forebears. And look, I'm not asking for the depth and complexity of a game like Detroit Become Human, although that would be amazing, but just give us at least like half or 2/3 of that depth. Another point around immersion is conflicting interests. I didn't like how in Skyrim you could be the listener of the Dark Brotherhood and then join the most honorable organization in the Companions and work your way to the top. And you could become the Archmage of the College of Winterhold without anyone having an idea that you're a werewolf. I understand for the casual player they probably don't care and they want to do everything on one save file, but I guess I'm more of a RPG purist who wants immersion and consequences in these games. This is the reactive depth that Bethesda games need now more than ever. But anyways, back to excess. I'm worried that we're gonna see a bunch of settlements and shipbuilding mechanics in Elder Scrolls 6. More like shipbuilding. I'm not opposed to these features, but what worries me is that Bethesda seems to rely too heavily on these elements to carry the game. Radiant quests and settlements are most likely going to exist in Elder Scrolls 6, which is fine, but they shouldn't make up more than 10% of the content of the game. The last thing I will talk about in terms of gluttony is how Skyrim had an excessive amount of dragons. Dragons were cool for like the first 30 hours of the game, but they quickly became a chore. It was incredibly annoying when a dragon would come and kill the NPCs in a town, or even the act of fighting a dragon became tiresome after you've killed 20 already.
Well, how many dragons have you overcome in your life?
I'm not interested in dragons, I'm interested in reality.
It's to the point where on any new character I make, I only beat the main story for the sake of getting dragon rend, because fighting the dragons without it is so damn annoying. It becomes a fight that you only engage in either for the gold of their bones and scales, or to be able to unlock new shouts since you need their souls. I don't have this complaint for any other mob or predator in Skyrim. This solely applies to dragons, where I feel that Bethesda overdid their presence.
Okay, so is there a worse predator than serpentine, flying, fire-breathing reptile? Is that not the imagistic equivalent of predator? So in what way, if predator is real, in what way isn't dragon real?
The mechanics behind the dragons are fine. I just wish they didn't appear so often in the game, especially after you finish the main quest. On a personal note, I want Bethesda to escape from dragons because I think they've served their purpose. But we all know that due to the commercial success of Skyrim, dragons will somehow be incorporated in Elder Scrolls 6. Let's just hope that it's in a side quest or through a reference or something else, and that they are not the same overly recurring tedious enemies that they became in Skyrim. Speaking of dragons, it's about time we talk about how Bethesda is dragging our wallets out of our pockets in any way they can. It's no secret that Bethesda is a greedy company. The horse came out of the bag on that one in 2006, and now with all of the Skyrim remasters, the allegations are beyond a doubt true. Bethesda is one money-hungry son of a skeever. The main issue I have with Bethesda in the modern day is the abuse of DLC and how their base games feel incomplete. Skyrim was the last game, in my opinion, that felt truly complete as a base game, and the DLC were actually justified in my opinion and reasonable in their prices. Fallout 4, on the other hand, had 6 DLC, double that of Skyrim's, and the base game felt like it was missing content, and they instead relied on the DLC to cover this gap. I will expand more on this in the Sloth section, but while we mentioned horse armor, abusing paid DLC, there is something you know I was going to bring up that I haven't yet.
There's an elefante in the room. You know I want to talk about it.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy this and not join them!
Paid mods. Do you guys remember all of the controversy that surrounded paid mods back in like 2015 when they first tried doing it? Well, now it's a decade later in the Big 25. Damn, I'm old. And Bethesda is going full force with the paid mods through the Creation Club. Speaking of 25, that's roughly the cut of revenue that modders receive from the Creation Club. This might be outdated since it's from a 2017 article, but let's run with this number for the sake of it and put it into perspective. Bethesda is taking a 75% cut of your revenue for a mod that you fully created and released to make their game better. Steam takes a 30% cut, and eBay takes an average of 12%. Bethesda is milking these modders dry for literally doing a service to their game. Now, I understand that the alternative with the donation system is not the best either, because no one donates. It's like the same problem with Wikipedia, but this percentage is literally predatory.
You have 3 nights. This counts as the first. You That would make me groan.
That actually happened. If I'm channeling my inner Obama, now let me be clear. I've heard the policy has changed to being a one-time payment now, but I'm not fully sure, and it wouldn't surprise me if the compensation is still unfair. To be honest though, I don't even fault Todd Howard for this, because I'm pretty sure it was his corporate overlords that pushed for the Creation Club to exist since it was easy dollar signs, and unfortunately it looks like it's gonna stay. But here is what I will say. Elder Scrolls 6 needs to be a complete game when it releases. It shouldn't be a game that needs a DLC and the Creation Club to feel complete. We already had those issues with Fallout 4, and if Bethesda wants the Elder Scrolls 6 to be the generational game that it needs to be, then the base game has to be exceptional, with even more content than Skyrim and all of its DLC combined. Then after a year or year and a half, because it's a given that it'll happen, it's guaranteed. If they want to release some DLC, fine. But only 3, and they have to be good DLC. None of that horse armor, Hearthfire, or Wasteland Workshop bullshit, okay? Alright, let me be honest, I actually enjoyed Hearthfire, but you get the point. We need quality DLC. We need quality DLC. Also, when it comes to special editions and anniversary versions, just don't do it. Let the game speak for itself, but since they're obviously going to make these versions anyway, at least give us 5 good years without these shenanigans. I'm going relatively light in this section because there is so much overlap with the next one, so let's get into it. Through the advent of the Creation Club, Bethesda has without a doubt become lazy. In religious discourses, atheists love to refer to this idea called the God of the Gaps, meaning that whatever science can't figure out, religious people love to say God is a part of. In the spheres of Bethesda, they have a similar saying called the mod of the gaps, where they treat mods as the catch-all solution for any holes in their game design.
Medicine. Medicine is what it is. Bona fide cure-all. Depression, stress, remorse, failure, it wipes it all away. The mind is a blackboard. And this is the eraser.
It's like they have a built-in insurance policy that will take care of any faults in their game, and so they can get away with putting less content out because modders will fix it anyway. But newsflash, Todd, the Game of the Year awards don't count mods as a part of your game, and neither do we. Yes, mods are a great thing, and they can elevate a game to essentially becoming immortal, like what has happened with Skyrim for instance, but mods should not be abused and relied on as the scapegoat for content. Bethesda seems to have fallen into this trap recently, where they treat their games as templates for mods, when in reality, they shouldn't even be thinking about mods. Mods should be irrelevant to Bethesda from a game design perspective. Don't twist up my words here. Obviously, Bethesda should make modding easy and have their updates be compatible with mods so that modders don't have to live a nightmare, but you get my point. From a game design perspective, Bethesda should not be thinking, we can cut this corner here because some mod will come along and fix it anyway. Elder Scrolls 6 needs to be so good that it doesn't matter whether you have mods or not. The last game that felt like a masterpiece even without the mods was Fallout New Vegas. And the joke there is that that's not even a Bethesda game. The reason why that game feels so immortal, regardless of mods, is because Obsidian cared about the writing first and foremost. Yes, I'm beating a dead horse here, but that's just something that we can't say for the latest Bethesda RPGs. Mods need to return to being the complements that they are supposed to be, rather than what they have become, which is the remedy for the disease.
They feed us poison, so we buy their cures, while they suppress our medicine.
Speaking of writing, there's a lazy guy you know I was gonna put in here. It's about time we talk about the elephant in the... It's about time we talk about the sloth, I guess, in the room. Emil Pagliarulo. Your time has come. Don't show up to the office tomorrow. Okay, Emil is clearly not lazy. I mean, just look at this transformation. That takes a lot of hard work. But if you're looking at Bethesda's recent games and their writing, and you're telling me that Emil is not lazy, that might just make it worse. Okay, let me be real here. Emil is a bit more of a complex character than we give him credit for, because how much of the stuff he actually writes is pretty murky, and we can't blame every bad quest on him. But it's more fun to have a poster boy for bad Bethesda writing, especially with all of the crash outs on Twitter, and I can rip into quotes like this for content.
We're gonna write the great American novel. It's gonna be this thing. And on every page will be written comedy and tragedy, and it'll be wonderful, it'll be amazing. And you're gonna give this book, this great American novel, to the player. And what are they gonna do with it? They're gonna rip out every page and make paper airplanes out of it. And they're gonna throw them around the room. And they're never gonna see your story. Because the story is there, right? They're gonna spend 30 hours making checks. Okay?
It's also funny when he plays Schrodinger's retconner on Twitter by spewing out Easter eggs only to retcon them after a few days because of the backlash. But here's the thing. Bethesda's writing as a whole has been subpar for at least the past decade, and Emil does share some responsibility in that. The sad part about this is that Emil has written some bangers in the past. Just look at the Dark Brotherhood storyline from Oblivion. So we know that he's capable of so much more than the garbage that's come out in recent years. To be completely fair to Bethesda, their environmental storytelling is probably the best in the industry. It's just that their writing, from their plots to their quests to their outcomes, is extremely weak. We need Elder Scrolls 6 to have a narrative that actually feels meaningful and interesting. Personally, I'm not a fan of the simple good versus evil plots that have taken over Bethesda games. I'm hoping we can get a return to the more sophisticated writing that was present in games like Morrowind, which centered around themes of prophecy, choice, and imperialism. Compare that complexity to Skyrim and it's night and day. Look, I'm not asking for Metal Gear level complexity here, but just give us something with substance that isn't completely forgettable. To give credit where it's due though, Fallout 4's main story, while not perfect, was much more nuanced in its subject matter. The question of whether sentience equates to humanity was a good one to explore. And yes, it's a common sci-fi trope, and it's basically copying and pasting Detroit Become Human, but it's an interesting dynamic nonetheless. I also appreciate that you can change the layout of the Commonwealth depending on which faction you side with. The side quests and factions also have to be well written obviously, and I'm hoping that Bethesda doesn't take any shortcuts here either. I have to mention this because Fallout 4, and Starfield especially, took a step back in this department. Just look at this graphic comparing the factions in Starfield to Morrowind, and keep in mind that Starfield had a much bigger team and a much bigger budget. They did a decent job with the side quests and factions in Skyrim, but I'm hoping they make choice a bigger element in Elder Scrolls 6 where your decisions have ripple effects on the world, and this would entice multiple playthroughs. This is the primary area of game design in Bethesda games that feels so weak and outdated, and it feels like if anything, your choices have become less influential throughout their games. The decisions also should be tough and much more morally gray than the stuff that we usually get. I am sick of how painfully black and white Bethesda games are, where they say that you can be whatever you want to be, but it ultimately boils down to are you evil or are you good? We need something which is much more sophisticated than that, and we need choices that actually conflict us and make us think. Your decision making and the speech tree in general were an extremely weak part of Skyrim. Come to think of it, your decision making has been weak in basically every Bethesda game. In Morrowind and Oblivion, the decision making is easier to excuse because those games are older. But the level of sophistication on how deep your choices go never advanced since those games. In a lot of Bethesda games, you only have two choices, and those lead to outcomes that don't have impacts anywhere else. Half the time there's only one choice, and the other dialogue options are just there to ask questions before your hand is ultimately forced into making the decision Bethesda wants you to make. If Bethesda ever made you play rock, paper, scissors, then it's like you would have multiple options. One would be throw rock, the second would be how do I beat scissors, the third option would be how do I lose to paper, and the fourth option would be what if I throw rock. So your only option would then become throwing rock. It's just incredibly dumb, and this design of their decision making has not progressed in any way. If Elder Scrolls 6 wants to succeed, then we need multiple scenarios that trickle down into other aspects of the game. We don't need games that have the width of an ocean, but the depth of a pond. The opposite is much better. Bethesda needs to stop being lazy and write out stories and choices that have ripple effects throughout your experience. They can either get off their asses and handwrite these like any other studio, or honestly, they could find a way to leverage AI to make the NPCs in the world reactive in real time to most if not all of your choices. I don't care how they do it, but we need a world that feels deep and reactive, not something that is indifferent to our inputs. And speaking of those inputs, give us actual unique choices that are nuanced and not just the good guy bad guy routes. If there is anything Bethesda should take away from this video, it's this. Give us unique and interesting choices that actually matter. And I already know that some loser is gonna go in the comments and type, "Bro, what are you talking about, man? Elder Scrolls has never been a choice-based RPG." And I get that, but the Elder Scrolls tries to be a RPG. And the best RPGs are choice-based. That's a fact. There might be a few exceptions here and there, but the best RPGs allow for player choice, and they give you consequences for your actions. We're in the Big 25. It shouldn't be that big of an ask to have the next Elder Scrolls game, which has 300 plus people working on it and a budget in the hundreds of millions, to actually have consequences and trickle-down effects for your choices so the world actually feels alive. So Bethesda, take some notes and fix this in the next one. Finally, when it comes to Sloth, we gotta talk about broken ports. If you're a PC gamer, you know the struggle of trying to play some games from Bethesda's catalog. Fallout 3 was notorious for being broken on the PC, and newer games like Starfield and the Oblivion Remaster are horribly optimized. Solving a very hard terminal in Fallout 3 should not be easier than launching the damn game. And Elder Scrolls 6 shouldn't require a supercomputer or a bachelor's in computer science to run. I understand it will be a demanding game, but please Bethesda, put in the time to make it stable, even if it's more demanding on your specs. I know we live in a shitty time where most new games are horribly optimized, but please don't use this as an excuse to make Elder Scrolls 6 another example of this. And now we move on to Envy, or Envy, as I'm sure you've realized a double entendre from the title card. But how does New Vegas relate to the sins of Bethesda if it isn't even a Bethesda game? Well, I've already brought this up, but the writing of New Vegas blows anything from Bethesda out of the water, especially in recent years. But that's not what I want to discuss here. I've already talked about that enough. I want to discuss distractions and how Bethesda takes on more than it can chew. Bethesda made Fallout 3, and I understand that Fallout 3 has gotten a bad rap in recent years, especially from those who played Fallouts 1 and 2, but you know what? They changed the formula for the franchise, and I think they ultimately did more good than harm. That might be a hot take, I understand. Fallout 3 is obviously not perfect. Here's a quote from my other video where I criticized the ending. Don't get me started on the ridiculously bad ending of Fallout 3. The whole ending was ruined by a fairly obvious oversight in the writing. They then fixed their mistake, but then in typical fashion, they make a DLC out of it and charge you for it.
Like, if you're a broke boy, just say so.
Which is obviously incredibly stupid. But then Obsidian takes a stab at it and makes Fallout New Vegas, which is easily the best Fallout game. And by the way, they tried to screw New Vegas during its development by giving them a super small window to make the game. And you know what? Obsidian still outperformed Bethesda. Right after New Vegas, Skyrim comes out, and now it's time to develop your next game. So if you're over at Bethesda and you have an ounce of common sense, then you would probably be like, let's let the Fallout guys do Fallout and we'll take over Elder Scrolls, right? No. Instead, Bethesda makes Fallout 4, which is pretty decent, but worse than Fallout New Vegas without a doubt. And then they make Fallout 76 for whatever reason. Okay, it's a bit unclear exactly who made Fallout 76, but we do know that Bethesda Game Studios, the A-team of Bethesda that is, then goes on to make Starfield, and you know the story from there. We can't have Bethesda being distracted and working on other bullshit projects when their bread and butter is Elder Scrolls. If they had an ounce of common sense, they could have given Obsidian Fallout 4, or at least co-developed it with them to lighten the load, so that they could have started development on Elder Scrolls 6 much sooner. I understand this is retrospective criticism because we know that Fallout 4 was worse than New Vegas and that 76 and Starfield didn't do well, but it seems like finally, after 13 years of horsing around, they are developing Elder Scrolls 6. How has Rockstar, which made GTA 5 after Skyrim and then went on to make a generational game in Red Dead Redemption 2, how are they nearly finished with GTA 6 while Elder Scrolls 6 is just starting development? Okay, I'm just ranting about the priorities over at Bethesda at this point, but let's go back to envy as in the actual sin. Bethesda is a jealous company. That's why Obsidian can't make another Fallout game, because they shined too bright when they did. Now I want to thank Esteldon for bringing this to light, I think that's how you say his name, and he's got a great video on this. But it's been confirmed by Chris Avallone, a writer of New Vegas and Fallout 2, those are the two best Fallouts by the way, and exceptionally well written games in general, that he was rejected from doing other Fallout and even Elder Scrolls spin-offs. He pitched the idea of having a game similar to New Vegas, made for Elder Scrolls, that would allow players to explore different areas between mainline games. And this would have helped Bethesda because it would give them some more time between their games, because the hunger of the fans is quenched for a little while. It's a win-win, right? Well, Bethesda knows that if they let this man, this menace, who's actually good at his job, not just good, one of the best to be clear, he's a great writer, maybe the best writer. I walked in this video, I said, wow, what a great writer this guy is. But Bethesda can't have this punk outdoing them in all of their IPs. First, Chris, you make a better Fallout than us, and now you have the gall to talk about Elder Scrolls? How dare you? His idea for the Elder Scrolls, by the way, was a spin-off game where the player actually fails in their quest and the villain wins, and then seeing how the world is shaped around that. It's a really cool and interesting dynamic, and I would have loved to see how this game played out. And this would be the break that we need from the Messiah complex that dominates the Elder Scrolls. But there's two things that are not allowed at Bethesda: women and originality. So Chris Avallone was ultimately refused. Also, while we're talking about Chris Avallone, the guy's catalog is insane, and he is probably the greatest RPG writer there is. But instead of humoring a guy who has nuanced writing, where every choice for the player is a tough one, Bethesda decides to stick with black and white choices where you can be the good guy or the bad guy. Yay! No moral ambiguity here. I'm sorry, I'm just really upset with Bethesda's writing. I don't usually dabble in conspiracies, but what happens to Chris Avallone after these rejected proposals? He gets hit with a bunch of false allegations, and he ultimately gets exiled to working on games where none of his writing gets published. And now he's at Wolfeye Studios, which gave us Weird West. Look, I'm not saying that there was a career hit job put on this man for doing too well, but I'm just observing the correlation here. Bethesda is an angry company. That's why they decided to hit Mojang with a cease and desist back in 2012 when Mojang wanted to call their game Scrolls. Bethesda claimed that this name followed too closely to the Elder Scrolls, but do you realize how insane that is? That's like if Lord of the Rings tried to sue Elden Ring because there could be some confusion between the two properties. Anyways, the word on the street is that Mojang challenged Bethesda to a best-of-3 Quake tournament, which Bethesda rejected, and went through with the lawsuit anyway, which was eventually settled, and Scrolls went on to become Caller's Bane. This interaction shows the pure anger of Bethesda, and how it's not willing to settle things in good faith, but instead, it needs to stick it to the smaller guys, which Mojang was a smaller company back in 2012. This anger has become much more apparent in recent years, with Bethesda punishing its player base by repeatedly releasing mediocre games with horrible optimization, or in other cases they just keep on releasing the same damn game.
Keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it!
I find it hard to believe that this company, which produced so many masterpieces back in the day, got bigger with a better team and instead of improving, went on to decline. It just doesn't make any sense, especially when you look at other big game devs which have only gotten better with time. It's clear through their recent games and how uninspired they are that there is a clear resentment of their more dedicated fans who also happen to be their most vocal critics. And so Bethesda sticks the knife to us by constantly releasing garbage to laugh in our faces. They get a thrill out of taking the franchises we loved and then burning them to the ground. And Elder Scrolls 6 is next on the chopping block. Okay, that conspiracy is a bit too far, and to be completely honest, I am probably more guilty of wrath than Bethesda. I'm literally making a 30-minute plus video essay just to voice my frustrations with this damn company. And let me make this abundantly clear while we're here. I've made a lot of jokes and implications about Bethesda through this video, but for legal purposes, I am playing a character, and everything in this video and the thumbnail is satire. We are joking about everything, and we will never criticize Bethesda in a manner that is actually serious. I know I've been taking a lot of shots at Todd Howard, but I actually really like him as a person, and I think he's a great director overall. It may not be fair, but he's just the face of Bethesda right now, and so a lot of the responsibility falls on him, even though a lot of the stuff I'm complaining about directly relates to the executives over at Zenimax, the parent company of Bethesda. To give credit where it's due, I remember reading somewhere that Chris Avellone stated that Todd Howard was not actually the one who vetoed his ideas for spin-offs, and Todd is usually chill about those things. And so a lot of the flack there goes directly toward the corporate overlords over at Bethesda. I'll keep it 350 with you, there's not much left to say about Wrath because a lot of it bleeds into the final section. So let's move on to the gravest sin of all.
This is the celebration of pride, the hedonistic celebration of pride. You know, we have Pride Month. Well, what are we celebrating? First of all, how about we don't celebrate pride? Pride's a cardinal sin.
Bethesda is a vain company. Their ego and sense of self has become incredibly overinflated over the years, and we all know that pride comes before a fall. That's exactly what happened to Bud Light. That is exactly what seemed to happen with Skyrim, where Bethesda released a game that was great, but not the best in terms of what they are capable of, especially with the writing. But Skyrim was still good enough to break through with the masses, and due to this game's commercial success, they became complacent and felt that they didn't need to move the needle anymore and could instead just release the same thing over and over again and people wouldn't notice. Bethesda hasn't changed the formula in decades. Although Skyrim has some new mechanics from its predecessors, and there are some improvements I absolutely love, the perk system, dual wielding, map diversity, dungeons, and smithing to name a few, the central gameplay loops from Oblivion to Skyrim are the same. That is not necessarily a problem, but they don't take the base formula and improve upon it in any meaningful way. Instead, they keep it the same, or even downgrade it in some cases, like with the aspects of choices and writing that we have already discussed before. And it's not like I'm the only person saying this. People have brought these issues up throughout the years. But despite this uproar from the more committed fans who want Bethesda to improve their game design, it seems that our calls have fallen on deaf ears. I remember after Skyrim, there were complaints about certain aspects of game design, but these rumblings increased a lot after Fallout 4, which got blown out of the water in the Game of the Year awards by The Witcher 3. As crazy as this is gonna sound, you can maybe give Fallout 76 a pass because it was a multiplayer experiment, but the issues were clearly not addressed in Starfield, which took every issue that a single-player Bethesda RPG has and cranked it up to 11. The fact that Bethesda does not listen to any of the warning signs is my biggest concern, because if there is one game where they shouldn't fuck around with, it's The Elder Scrolls 6. But here's the problem. No matter how much we say, it's ultimately up to Bethesda to take action and to rectify these wrongs. We can use our Thuum and shout from the throat of the world, but if Bethesda doesn't care about putting in its best effort, then there's really nothing we can do. We can try to entice them by reminding them about the respect they'll receive from audiences, the critical acclaim their games will get, maybe even the Game of the Year awards, or maybe because, you know, they owe it to their fans. But if Bethesda is only after money, then what can we do? Skyrim succeeded too much for Elder Scrolls 6 to be anything but a billion-dollar game. But whether Elder Scrolls 6 will be a great game is where there is no guarantee. That choice is ultimately up to Bethesda. I've yapped in this video for long enough, so I'll leave you with this. The question at this point isn't how can Elder Scrolls 6 be saved, it's whether Bethesda wants to.